A single dad can't afford his daughter's dream dress for the biggest night of her young life until a stranger in the boutique quietly changes everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The bell above the door gave a cheerful chime as Michael and Lily stepped into the boutique, the warm air inside a welcome escape from the cold bite of late December. The space smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood, and soft classical music played in the background. Racks of dresses shimmered under golden lighting sequins, satin, lace all draped in careful rows, like a fairy tale closet come to life. Lily's eyes widened. "Wow," she breathed, tugging at Michael's calloused hand. "Dad, look at that one." She pointed to a long, ice-blue gown hanging in the front display. It sparkled with tiny silver stars stitched into the fabric, the kind of dress that turned little girls into winter princesses. Michael smiled softly as he looked at her cheeks, flushed pink from the cold, eyes full of excitement. 7 going on 17, he thought. He gave her hand a little squeeze. "Go ahead, take a look." Lily dashed over, fingers grazing the delicate fabric as if afraid it might melt at her touch. Michael followed more slowly, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. A list. Dance dress, shoes, tights. Next to each item, a number. He'd run the totals 3 times the night before, circling the lowest options in hopeful pencil. A polite voice cut in. "Can I help you find anything?" A young woman with perfectly styled hair and a name tag that read Mara smiled at them. Michael returned the gesture, lifting the list. "Just browsing today. School dance coming up." Mara's gaze moved from the paper to Lily, then to the blue dress. "Ah, that one's a favorite. Just came in. It's $4.99. Michael's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded. "It's beautiful." He caught Lily's hopeful glance, the silent question in her eyes. "Can we?" He gently shook his head, barely perceptible, and her expression didn't fall, but it changed. That brave, practiced smile he knew too well settled on her face. "We'll keep looking," he said, voice even. He steered her gently toward a rack in the back, one labeled "Clearance" in quiet, embarrassed letters. Unseen behind a mirrored pillar, a woman paused her browsing. She had heard every word. The dress shimmered like a frozen lake under moonlight. It hung in the front window, poised on a delicate mannequin, with gloved hands and silver heels, as if waiting for someone worthy to wear it. Layers of pale blue tulle floated just above the floor, and the bodice sparkled with tiny silver beads that caught every flicker of light from the boutique's chandelier. Lily stood pressed to the glass, breath fogging the window as she gazed up at it, completely still. Michael had seen that look before, pure awe wrapped in quiet longing. The kind of look a kid gets when they believe in magic, even if just for a second. "That's the one," she whispered, eyes wide. "That's the one I want." Michael didn't respond right away. He stared at the dress too, but with a very different feeling settling in his chest. He didn't need to step inside to know it was expensive. Everything about how it was displayed, how it glimmered, screamed unreachable. Still, he forced a smile. "It's beautiful," he said, tousling her hair. "Like something Elsa would wear." Lily grinned. "Do you think they have my size?" "We can ask," he said gently, already dreading the answer. They stepped into the boutique together, the bell giving that familiar chime. Lily made a beeline for the window display while Michael lingered near the entrance, his eyes scanning for a price tag, something to give him warning before hope got too far ahead. A clerk approached, all soft tones and practiced poise. "Would you like to try it on?" she asked Lily, who nodded with such enthusiasm Michael felt his throat tighten. The clerk smiled and carefully removed the dress from the mannequin. "This one's a size 8, but it should be just right for you." Michael finally saw the tag, $499. He stepped back slightly, folding his arms. Rent was due next week. The heater in the truck still needed fixing. Groceries, gas. A dozen small things that added up fast when you lived paycheck to paycheck. Lily held the dress in her arms, like it was made of clouds. "Dad," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder, "can I just try it on?" Michael nodded, even though everything in him ached. "Of course, sweetheart. Go ahead." He knew it wouldn't leave the store with them, but he also knew the look on her face in that moment was worth 100 dresses he couldn't buy. The changing room door creaked open, and Lily stepped out slowly, hands clutching the sides of the shimmering blue dress. It swayed around her like a storybook spell come to life. Her eyes searched for Michael's, wide and waiting. "Well?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful. Michael smiled, because how could he not? She looked radiant, not just because of the dress, but because of the way she stood in it, like the world had briefly forgotten to weigh her down. Like a little girl was allowed to just be a little girl. "You look beautiful, Lily. Absolutely beautiful." She lit up, cheeks glowing, spinning once in the mirror's reflection. But Michael's eyes drifted back to the price tag still hanging from the sleeve. $4.99. Nearly half a month's rent. He cleared his throat, voice measured. "You want to try a few more? I saw some other really pretty ones back by the dressing rooms." Lily paused mid-spin. "I don't think any of them are as nice as this one." "I know," he said gently. "But sometimes it's not about the fanciest dress. It's about how you feel in it, right? And I think you'd shine in anything." She studied him for a moment, eyes sharper than he wanted to admit. At 7, she already knew when he was deflecting. Still, she nodded slowly and gave him a tiny smile. "Okay, Dad." Michael helped her back into the fitting room, then stepped aside, running a hand over his face. He hated this part the tightrope walk between reality and dreams. He never wanted Lily to feel like she couldn't want things, like she had to measure joy in dollars and cents. But the numbers didn't lie. When she came back out in a plainer dress, a pale pink one with a crooked seam near the waist, she smiled up at him with all the same excitement. "What do you think?" she asked. He swallowed, heart heavy and proud all at once. "I think you're still the most beautiful girl in the room." She nodded. "This one's good too. I like it." But, as they walked toward the register, Michael saw her glance back, just once the blue dress, hanging alone in the mirror's reflection. Evelyn Hart wasn't used to shopping in small-town boutiques. She preferred private showrooms, quiet stylists who brought dresses to her loft in the city. But that morning, a delayed meeting and a detour through town had led her hair a curiosity, more than necessity, pulling her through the boutique's door. She wandered the softly lit aisles with measured steps, her heels clicking gently on the wood floors, one gloved hand trailing the edge of a silk shawl on a display rack. She was considering a navy-wrap dress when she heard it the gentle, too careful voice of a man trying to soften disappointment. "You want to try a few more? I saw some other really pretty ones back by the dressing rooms." Evelyn didn't turn. She simply stood still, her body angled toward a mirrored pillar, her attention suddenly fixed on the quiet exchange unfolding just a few feet away. The man was dressed in worn work boots and a faded flannel, his hands rough and grease, stained in a way that suggested he worked with machines, not money. The little girl, his daughter, clearly held a stunning blue gown in her arms like it was glass. The way she looked at it reminded Evelyn of herself, at that age, before the privilege, before the name, before everything became measured in deals and deadlines. "This one's good too." "I like it," the girl said, as she stepped out again in a far simpler dress, the words bright but not quite reaching her eyes. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the man. His expression was careful, composed, grateful for his daughter's willingness to adapt, but not unaware of the cost behind her brave smile. She watched as they walked toward the register, his hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. Something in Evelyn's chest tugged unexpected, unfamiliar. She didn't know them, didn't know their names or their story. But in that small, unguarded moment, she saw something real. A father trying to give his daughter everything, even when everything wasn't enough. And before she even realized what she was doing, Evelyn turned toward the counter not to pay for her own purchase, but to speak quietly to the boutique owner, her voice low and steady. "I'd like to make arrangements for the girl in the blue dress," she said, quietly. The boutique door chimed softly as Michael and Lily stepped out into the cold, their breath turning to clouds in the early afternoon air. Michael held the plain white garment bag over one shoulder, and Lily clutched his hand with fingers wrapped in pink knit gloves. She didn't say much, but he could tell by the way she kept glancing at the bag then back at the window that her heart had stayed behind, hanging on that silver hanger like something forgotten. Inside, Evelyn remained still, watching them through the frosted glass. The way the man pulled his coat tighter around the girl, shielding her from the wind without thinking twice, said everything. No hesitation, no complaint. Just quiet love, worn at the edges, but unwavering. She turned away before she could feel too much. The boutique owner, a woman named Christine with silver glasses and sharp instincts, met Evelyn at the register with a subtle nod. "Was there something you needed, Miss Hart?" Evelyn removed her gloves slowly, smoothing them against the marble counter. "That little girl," she said softly, "the one who tried on the blue dress, what size was it?" Christine didn't ask why. 8, she replied. "Perfect," Evelyn said, reaching into her handbag and pulling out a sleek leather wallet. "I'd like to purchase it." Along with the shoes she was looking at, silver ones, size 2, I think. Christine's brow lifted. "For the girl?" Evelyn nodded once. "Yes. I don't want them to know it was me. Wrap it nicely, please. And deliver it to this address." She pulled out a card and scribbled something on the back. "You've got a delivery service, I assume?" "Of course," Christine said, taking the card and glancing briefly at the neat handwriting. Evelyn hesitated, her voice softer now. "Make sure she gets it before the dance, not a day later." Christine smiled, not the practiced one she gave to paying customers, but something genuine. "It'll be there. Don't worry." Evelyn gave a small nod and turned to leave. No need for credit, no ribbon-tied note, no grand gesture. Just a dress for a girl who deserved to feel like Magus, even if just for one night. Kindness didn't need to be announced. Sometimes the quietest gifts were the ones that echoed the loudest. The next morning broke cold and gray, the kind of early winter sky that looked permanently overcast, like the sun had decided to sleep in. Michael stood outside the auto shop, breath fogging the air as he locked up his truck. The engine had coughed all the way there, the heater rattling like it might give out for good this time. He rubbed his hands together and turned toward the shop door, then paused. Something was tucked beneath his windshield wiper. He glanced around. The street was mostly empty, just a couple of early risers shuffling past the diner across the road and a delivery truck double-parked 2 storefronts down. Curious, he stepped back to the truck and peeled the small white envelope from the glass. It was plain, no stamp, no return address. Just his name, written across the front in delicate, looping script. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper and a smaller envelope tucked inside it. He opened the note first. "For the girl who deserves to shine. A friend." That was it. No explanation, no signature. Just that single line. Michael frowned, unfolding the second envelope with careful hands. Inside cash. A lot of it. His chest tightened as he counted. 5 crisp $100 bills, folded neatly. Enough to buy the dress. Enough to buy the shoes. Enough to make Lily's face light up, in that way he hadn't seen since before her mom passed. His first instinct was suspicion. He looked around again, as if someone might be watching. Anonymous money didn't show up without strings. That was a fact he'd learned a long time ago. But then he looked at the note again. For the girl who deserves to shine. He thought of Lily twirling in the blue dress, the way she'd looked at herself like maybe, just maybe, she believed she could be something special, just for one night. And something in him shifted. He didn't know who had left the envelope, but in that moment, standing in the cold morning air with paper in his hand and hope curling in his chest, Michael let himself believe for once that not every gift came with a catch. Michael sat in the break room of the shop, the envelope resting on the table like it might explode. Around him, the steady rhythm of tools echoed through the garage, ratchets clicking, air compressors hissing, someone's classic rock station playing faintly from a nearby workbench, but he heard none of it. Not really. He stared at the money again. 5 crisp hundreds. Not torn, not folded like tips from a bar. They were clean, fresh, purposeful. Whoever left this had planned it. He turned the note over once more, but there was nothing on the back. No number, no name. Just the simple, handwritten line. For the girl who deserves to shine. There was no mistake about who it was meant for. He picked up the envelope and held it in both hands. It was light. Too light for the weight it carried. A part of him wanted to reject it, return it to no one and nothing. He didn't like charity, never had. He'd spent years holding everything together with duct tape, late nights, and sheer stubbornness. Taking money from a stranger, even for Lily, felt like swallowing something sharp. But then, his mind drifted back to the boutique. To the blue dress in the window, the way Lily had twirled, glowing with a joy she didn't often let show anymore. He saw again how she'd smiled when she came out in the cheaper dress, all grace and quiet compromise. That look, the one that said, "I know, Dad. I understand. She shouldn't have to understand, not at 7. Not yet." Michael leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't know who had done this. Maybe a kind stranger overheard their conversation. Maybe someone in town who knew too much about his situation. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was this. Someone had seen Lily, really seen her, and decided she was worth more than what her dad's wallet could manage. No strings, no demands. Just kindness. He opened his phone and pulled up the boutique's number. "Hi, yes," he said when the clerk answered. "That blue dress in the front window, is it still there?" Michael stood outside the boutique that afternoon, the envelope heavy in his coat pocket, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces. He stared through the glass at the dress still there, still glowing under the soft lighting like it was waiting just for them. The silver stars on the bodice caught the late-day sun and scattered light like glitter across the polished floor. He hadn't told Lily about the envelope, not yet. He couldn't bring himself to. Not until he knew what he was going to do. The door opened with that same cheerful chime as they stepped inside. Lily ran ahead without hesitation, her boots clicking across the floor, her excitement bubbling up like it had never left. "It's still here," she gasped, practically dancing toward the mannequin. "I thought for sure someone would have bought it already." Michael offered a quiet smile, but inside, he was tangled. Every instinct in him bristled at the thought of using the money. He'd worked too hard, too long, to take handouts. Pride wasn't about arrogance, it was about standing tall when there wasn't much left holding you up. But this wasn't about him. He watched Lily's reflection in the mirror as she reached up, brushing her fingers over the dress like it might vanish if she touched it too hard. Her eyes sparkled with something he hadn't seen in a long time, pure, unhindered joy. The kind of happiness that didn't ask for permission. She turned to him, hopeful. "Do you think, just maybe, we could try again?" He didn't answer at first. He pulled the envelope from his pocket, thumb brushing over the sealed flap. "For the girl who deserves to shine." "Yeah," he said quietly, his voice thick. "I think we can." Lily blinked, stunned. "Really?" Michael nodded, clearing his throat. "Let's try it on again. Make sure it's still your favorite." She squealed, rushing over to hug him, arms tight around his waist. "You're the best, Dad." And just like that, the weight in his chest cracked open. Maybe pride wasn't in never needing help. Maybe it was in choosing love over ego. In letting his daughter have her moment even if someone else had made it possible. Lily stepped out of the fitting room slowly, her small hands holding the sides of the dress like she was afraid to breathe too hard. But once she looked at herself in the boutique mirror, really looked, she couldn't help it. She twirled. The layers of pale blue tulle flared out like a snowflake in motion, the tiny silver stars catching the light, each turn making her laugh with delight. Her joy filled the quiet boutique, soft and sincere, like music only Michael could hear. He stood nearby, arms crossed, pretending to study the stitching along a row of dresses, but he couldn't stop watching her. His daughter, his little girl. For once, not worrying, not settling, not choosing something just because it was good enough. She looked like she belonged in that dress. not because of the fabric or the price tag, but because it reflected something inside her bright, hopeful, magical. "You look like a princess," he said, voice a little rough around the edges. Lily beamed at him, eyes glowing. "Do I really?" He nodded. "The kind they write stories about." The sales clerk approached, smiling warmly. "Would you like us to wrap it up, sir?" Michael hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope. He didn't look at it this time. He just handed her the bills and nodded. "Yes, please." The clerk counted the money with a knowing glance, but said nothing. She folded the dress carefully, wrapping it in crisp white tissue and laying it into a pale blue garment bag like it was made of glass. As she passed it across the counter, Michael took it with both hands. It felt heavier now, like it held more than just a dress. Like it held choices and sacrifices and a kind of love that couldn't be priced. Lily skipped ahead of him as they left, humming to herself, her feet barely touching the floor. Michael followed behind. The smile on his face real, but not without weight. The dress was hers, the joy was hers. But part of him still wondered who had given it to them. And why. The night of the winter dance arrived crisp and clear, the sky velvet dark and freckled with stars. Michael stood in their small living room, the coffee table pushed aside to make room for Lily to get ready. The scent of hairspray lingered in the air, mixing with the light sweetness of her strawberry shampoo. Her bedroom door was closed, and he waited with his phone in hand, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he had somewhere important to be, though nowhere on earth was more important than right here. "Ready?" he called out gently. "Almost," came her excited voice. Then, after a few seconds, "Okay, you can look now." The door creaked open and Lily stepped out. For a moment, Michael forgot how to speak. She moved slowly, her hands brushing the skirt of the pale blue dress as it floated around her knees. The silver stars shimmered with every step, and her hair was swept to the side in soft curls, a little clip holding back the strands she'd always insisted were too wild. Her shoes sparkled faintly in the lamplight. But more than anything, it was her smile. Wide, radiant, shy but proud, she was breathtaking. Michael blinked hard, the familiar sting at the corners of his eyes threatening to spill over. "Dad?" she asked, pausing. "Do I look okay?" He let out a quiet laugh, thick with emotion. "Lily, you look more than okay. You look like magic." She beamed and gave a playful twirl, the skirt catching air like a cloud. "Wait, wait," he said, lifting his phone. "Hold still, no wait. Do that again." She twirled once more, arms outstretched, giggling as he snapped photo after photo. Michael didn't care that his phone was old, or that the lighting wasn't perfect. These pictures weren't for anyone else. They were for the days he needed to remember that even in the hardest moments, he'd done something right. "You think Mom would have liked it?" Lily asked, voice quieter now. Michael nodded slowly, a lump rising in his throat. "She'd be in awe, just like I am," and as he zipped up her coat and walked her to the car, dress carefully cradled beneath it, he couldn't help but feel like something larger had wrapped around them that night. Not just fabric and tulle but grace. Across the street from the Turners' modest home, a dark-colored sedan sat parked beneath a quiet stretch of maple trees, its engine off, its windows slightly fogged from the cold. Inside, Evelyn Hart sat behind the wheel, gloved hands resting motionless on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the warm yellow glow spilling from the house across the way. She hadn't meant to stop. Not really. She'd been on her way back from a meeting in a neighboring town when something, maybe a pull, maybe just curiosity, had drawn her down that quiet residential street. She'd recognized the house immediately. Christine, the boutique owner, had given her the address when Evelyn insisted on a discreet delivery. "In case something goes wrong," she'd said. Nothing had gone wrong. Evelyn watched now as the front door opened and Lily stepped out, her small figure wrapped in a winter coat, the hem of a pale blue dress peeking out beneath it like a secret. Her father followed, placing a careful hand on her back as they made their way down the porch steps. Lily was glowing. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see it, that joyful light in her posture. The way she tilted her head up, as if the world finally saw her the way she saw herself. The dress fit perfectly. But more than that, it belonged to her, as though she had brought it to life by wearing it. Michael walked her around to the car and opened the door with a practiced gentleness. There was no rushing, no fumbling, just quiet care. He helped her in, closed the door softly, then paused for a moment, head bowed, hands in his pockets, as if gathering himself. Evelyn looked away, a sudden tightness rising in her chest. She hadn't expected it to feel like this. It was supposed to be simpleia, small kindness, nothing more. But watching them now, it didn't feel small. It felt important. Like she'd stepped into someone else's story for a brief moment and unknowingly left her fingerprint on the page. She didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there, wrapped in silence, watching the taillights fade into the distancer, heart fuller than it had been in a very long time. The engine gave a soft but unmistakable pop, followed by a flicker of warning lights on the dashboard. Evelyn's grip tightened on the steering wheel as her car slowed to a crawl along the shoulder of the narrow two-lane road just outside town. She sighed, frustrated, and guided the sleek black Mercedes to a stop beside an old gas station sign that squeaked in the wind. "Well, that's convenient," she muttered under her breath, eyeing the glowing check engine light like it had personally betrayed her. She glanced out the window and spotted a modest garage across the street. Turner's Auto Repair, the sign read in faded red paint. A few old pickups were parked outside, their hoods open like yawning mouths. It wasn't exactly the type of place she usually brought her car, but with no cell service and an increasingly angry engine, options were limited. Grabbing her coat, Evelyn stepped out into the cold and crossed the street. Inside, the shop was warm and smelled of oil, rubber, and coffee that had been sitting on a burner too long. Tools lined the walls, and a small radio played low country music in the corner. She approached the counter and cleared her throat. "Excuse me, I think my car just died," she said. "It's a black." Before she could finish, a man stepped out from beneath one of the cars, wiping his hands on a rag. He wore a dark gray hoodie dusted with road grit, and there was a streak of grease across his cheek. He looked up, and their eyes met. Michael blinked. Evelyn hesitated. Something about him felt oddly familiar, the steady eyes, the quiet presence, but she couldn't place him. She tilted her head slightly, polite but guarded. "Do you have time for one more today?" Michael studied her for a beat too long, then nodded. "Yeah, I think we can squeeze you in." He didn't say anything else. Didn't mention the blue dress, the envelope, or the night she'd watched them from her car. She didn't recognize him, not yet. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done crossing their paths. Michael lifted the hood of the Mercedes with practiced ease, the engine still ticking softly as it cooled. He ran his fingers along the edge of the compartment, already narrowing down the issue. Luxury cars weren't new to him, he didn't see many in town, but he'd always had a way with machines, whether they were rusted-out pickups or sleek, polished imports. Still, it wasn't the engine that had him distracted, it was her. He'd known the moment she stepped into the shop. Same coat, same calm voice, same careful presence, like she didn't want to take up too much space but somehow still filled the room. The woman from the boutique. The stranger who had left an envelope on his windshield and disappeared without a word. Evelyn Hart. He didn't say anything. Just nodded, took her keys, and went to work giving her the same quiet attention he gave every car, every customer. But something stirred beneath his steady rhythm, something that felt like unfinished business. Back inside the office, Evelyn wandered toward the counter, her fingers brushing lightly along a shelf filled with engine manuals and a jar of peppermint candies. She glanced at the cluttered desk service invoices, a half-empty coffee cup, a photo frame tilted slightly toward the wall. She leaned in. It was a picture of a little girl in a pale blue dress, twirling in front of a cracked mirror, her smile wide and unfiltered. Evelyn froze. That dress, the dress. The image hit her like a forgotten echo. She stared for a second longer, then slowly looked up, her eyes, meeting Michael's just as he stepped back into the office. Realization bloomed across her face, slow and certain. "It was you," she said softly. Michael didn't look away. He wiped his hands on a rag, then gave a small, knowing nod. "And you were the one who left the envelope," Evelyn exhaled, surprised by how exposed she felt. She opened her mouth, searching for something to say, but Michael just gestured to the photo. "She loved that dress," he said simply. "Still talks about it." Silence settled between them, not awkward, but full. Like the space between two pages in a story waiting to turn. Michael leaned back against the edge of the counter, arms crossed, the rag still crumpled in his hand. The shop felt suddenly too quiet, just the faint hum of the space heater and the ticking of Evelyn's cooling engine outside. He studied her, unsure how to move forward. Part of him had played this moment out in his head before, but now that she was standing in front of him, it felt more complicated. "I wasn't sure I'd ever get the chance to say anything," he said, his voice low but steady. "Didn't expect you to walk into my garage, that's for sure." Evelyn gave a soft laugh, a little nervous. "Believe me, I didn't expect it either." He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the floor for a moment. "I guess I should say thank you." She tilted her head. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it harder." Her brows drew together, but she didn't interrupt. Michael exhaled. "You didn't just help Lily. You gave her something I couldn't at the time, something she'll remember for the rest of her life, and I'm grateful for that. But—" he paused, rubbing the back of his neck. "I need to ask why. Was it just charity, a rich woman doing her good deed for the year?" Evelyn didn't flinch. She stepped a little closer, her voice calm and firm. "It was never about pity, Michael." His eyes met hers again, searching. She continued, quieter now. "I saw a little girl who believed in something just for a moment. And I saw a father who would have given the world if he could. That wasn't something I could walk away from. Not because I felt sorry for you, but because I respected you." Michael looked at her for a long moment, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding that doubt, though deeply pride could tangle with gratitude. Evelyn gave a small smile, genuine and unguarded. "It wasn't about money. It was about kindness, that's all." And for the first time since the envelope appeared on his windshield, Michael believed her. The next morning, Michael was elbow-deep in an old Chevy truck when he heard the sound of heels clicking against the concrete floor, soft, unexpected rhythm in a place where boots and grease-stained sneakers were the norm. He looked up. Evelyn stood at the edge of the garage bay, holding 2 coffee cups in a cardboard tray. The same tailored coat, the same composed smile, but something in her posture was different, less guarded, more intentional. He wiped his hands on a nearby towel and stepped toward her, raising an eyebrow. "Back already? Car still acting up?" She shook her head, extending one of the cups toward him. "Nope. Just thought I'd drop by. I figured you probably don't get to sneak away for decent coffee during the day." Michael accepted the cup with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "This isn't from the gas station, is it?" "God, no," she said, mock-offended. "It's from the little cafe 2 blocks down. You look like someone who takes it black." He smirked. "You're not wrong." They stood there for a moment, the quiet hum of the shop filling the silence between them. Evelyn glanced around at the organized chaos of toolboxes, engine parts, and scribbled repair logs taped to the walls. "This place," she said softly, "it feels like you." Michael sipped his coffee. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "It is," she replied with a small smile. "It's honest, worn in, reliable." He chuckled under his breath, the sound catching him by surprise. "You don't strike me as someone who has much time for places like this." "I don't," she admitted. Or didn't. "But I realized I didn't really want to go back to a world where everything is polished and filtered. Not today." Michael studied her, noting the sincerity in her words. "So what brought you back, really?" Evelyn looked down at her coffee for a second, then met his eyes. "I wanted to know more about you, about Lily, about how someone with nothing extra to give somehow gives everything anyway." He didn't have an answer, but something in his chest stirred a cautious warmth, unfamiliar and quiet. He tipped his coffee toward her. "Guess you'll have to stick around and find out." The bell above the shop door chimed just after noon, and Michael glanced up from beneath the lifted hood of a dusty SUV to see Lily step inside, cheeks pink from the cold and backpack slipping off one shoulder. "Hey, kiddo," he called, wiping his hands on a rag. "Early dismissal?" She nodded, already bouncing toward him. "Yeah." Mrs. Campbell said the pipes froze again. "Can I hang out here till you're done?" "You know the drill. Homework first." Lily gave a theatrical sigh, but smiled. "Deal." She wandered toward the small break room in the corner, but froze when she saw Evelyn seated there, a paperback in one hand and a half-empty coffee cup beside her. The two locked eyes. Evelyn smiled first. "Hi there, you must be Lily." Lily turned to her dad, brow lifted with mild suspicion. "Dad, who's this?" Michael grinned, stepping in. "This is Evelyn. She's a friend. She brought me coffee yesterday and somehow hasn't been scared off yet." Lily approached carefully, sizing Evelyn up like a curious cat. "You don't look like Dad's usual customers." Evelyn laughed gently, closing her book. "I'll take that as a compliment." Michael shook his head. "Lily." But Evelyn leaned down slightly, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "I don't usually hang out in garages either, but yours is warmer than most boardrooms." That made Lily giggle, her arms uncrossing. Evelyn tilted her head. "Can I see a picture of your dance dress?" Lily's eyes lit up, and she dropped her backpack immediately. "Wait here." Within seconds, she returned with her phone and a big grin, flipping through pictures with Evelyn leaning close. "That's me before the dance, and this one's me spinning, and that one's my favorite. Dad took it just before we left." Evelyn studied the image, like it was something precious. "You looked like you stepped out of a snow globe," Lily beamed, then looked between her dad and Evelyn with a thoughtful squint. "You're really nice. Are you going to be around more?" Michael raised a brow. "Lily?" Evelyn, still smiling, glanced at him too. "Well, that depends." Lily just grinned. "I hope so." The shop was quiet after hours, the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead softening to a hum as the evening settled in. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows over the sidewalk, and the last hints of daylight had faded into deep blue. Michael sat on an old bench near the garage's back wall, a thermos of lukewarm coffee in his hand. Across from him, Evelyn perched on an overturned crate, her coat folded neatly beside her, and a half-eaten muffin resting in a napkin on her lap. It had started as a simple check-in. She'd stopped by to ask about a strange noise in her car, but she hadn't brought the car. Just herself. And somehow, staying had felt natural. They'd been talking for over an hour now. "You really wanted to be a writer?" Evelyn asked, her voice gentle, curious, without pressing. Michael chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, back in high school. Thought I'd write some gritty novel about small-town life and broken-down cars. Something honest." "What stopped you?" He took a sip of coffee. "Life. Bills. A daughter who needed her dad more than the world needed another story about rust and regret." Evelyn nodded, quiet for a beat. "You still could, you know. Write something." He looked at her, brows lifted. "You think I have time between break jobs and bedtime routines?" "You find time for everything else," she said softly. He didn't answer that. Instead, he turned the question on her. "What about you? You run one of the biggest firms on the East Coast. That can't have been the dream." Evelyn smiled, small and a little sad. "It was, once. I thought success would feel like freedom, but sometimes it just feels like pressure. People see the money, the title. They don't see the loneliness that comes with being the person who never asks for help." Michael nodded. "Yeah, I know that feeling." She looked at him then, really looked. "How do you do it, Michael? Raise a kid alone? Run a business? Hold it all together?" He leaned back, eyes distant but kind. "One day at a time. Some days you break, most days you bend. but you keep going because there's someone small who believes you can. And Evelyn, sitting in a drafty garage with the scent of motor oil clinging to her sleeves, realized that in all her high-rise meetings and luxury travel, she'd never felt more grounded than in that moment. Rain tapped gently on the garage roof, a soft percussion that filled the silence between words. The shop was closed for the night, the open sign flipped and the bay doors pulled down, sealing them in a cocoon of quiet warmth and dim light. Michael sat with his back against the wall, legs stretched out, grease still faintly smudging his sleeves. Evelyn was next to him, not on a crate this time, but on an old stool pulled from the corner, her heels kicked off, feet tucked beneath her. Neither of them rushed the conversation. There was no need. Michael broke the stillness first. Lily's mom, her name was Hannah. His voice wasn't heavy, just honest, like he'd been carrying the words for a while and was finally ready to set them down. She passed away 5 years ago. Car accident. One of those icy mornings in February when you think you'll be fine if you just drive slow. Evelyn didn't speak, just listened, eyes steady, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea he'd brewed with a dented kettle on the break room stove. She was good at everything I wasn't, he continued, a faint smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. Organized, optimistic, always had a plan. I was the fixer, she was the glue. He looked away for a moment. I wasn't sure how to raise Lily without her. Still not, some days. I just try not to screw up more than I help. You're not screwing up, Evelyn said quietly. He glanced at her, surprised by the certainty in her tone. You're doing more right than most people with every advantage in the world, she added. I see it in the way she looks at you. Michael gave a small nod, swallowing the lump in his throat. What about you? Anyone ever look at you like that? Evelyn let out a soft breath. Not in a long time. She set the tea down and leaned back. People see what I do, what I own, not who I am. I built an empire, but somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life. I have meetings booked 6 months in advance, but no one to call when I can't sleep. Michael didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. They sat in silence again, not awkward or strained, just real. Two people who had lost different things, but somehow found a quiet corner of the world where none of it had to be hidden. The invitation had come in the simplest Wayno embossed card. No formal language. Just Evelyn, leaning against the counter at the shop one evening, her eyes light but nervous, asking, "Would you and Lily want to have dinner with me tomorrow? Somewhere different?" Michael had hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because different in Evelyn's world likely meant upscale, polished, and completely out of his depth. Still, when he glanced at Lily and saw her eyes widen with excitement, he couldn't say no. Now, standing in the lobby of the rooftop restaurant, Michael tugged slightly at the collar of his only blazer, an old charcoal jacket that hadn't seen daylight since a cousin's wedding. Lily clutched his hand, wearing the pale pink dress she'd picked out herself, and a clip in her hair shaped like a tiny bow. "Dad," she whispered, gazing at the shimmering chandeliers above them. "This place is fancy," he chuckled softly. "Yeah, I figured that out when the valet called me sir, and didn't flinch at the truck." Then Evelyn appeared, stepping out from the elevator like she belonged to another world entirely. Her black dress was simple but elegant, her hair swept back, and yet she smiled with a warmth that made the distance between their lives feel a little smaller. "You look amazing," Michael said before he could stop himself. "So do you," she replied, her eyes flicking to Lily. "And you look like you stepped out of a fairy tale," Lily grinned. "I feel like it." The hostess led them to a window-side table where the city stretched out below like a sea of twinkling lights. Evelyn ordered with practiced ease, and when the waiter placed a cloth napkin in Lily's lap, the girl looked at her dad with wide, amused eyes. Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed with a strange ease. Evelyn asked Lily about school, about her favorite books, and whether she liked pancakes with chocolate chips or blueberries better. Lily never shy-talked like she'd known Evelyn for years. Michael watched them both, a quiet feeling blooming in his chest. This wasn't just dinner. It was something rare, something that, for once, felt like more than a glimpse of someone else's world. It felt like an invitation into it. The night after the dinner, Michael lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling of his small bedroom, the rhythmic hum of the old heater doing little to quiet the thoughts circling in his mind. Dinner had been perfect. Too perfect. Lily hadn't stopped talking about the lights, the view, or the crème brûlée she couldn't pronounce, but declared her new favorite food. But something inside him twisted, even as he smiled at her joy. Over the next few days, he returned Evelyn's texts more slowly. He kept his answers shorter, his schedule busier. He didn't mean to disappear, not exactly. He just didn't know how to hold this thing, this growing connection, without cracking something in the process. At the shop, he poured himself into work, fixing 3 cars in one day, skipping lunch, sweeping the floor twice just to stay moving. When Evelyn stopped by unexpectedly with 2 coffees and that same easy smile, he didn't meet her eyes. "You okay?" she asked, noticing the shift instantly. "Yeah, just swamped," he replied, taking the coffee, but not the moment. She lingered a beat. "I was thinking, maybe dinner again this weekend. Casual this time. Pizza. Movies. Your place, mine whatever's easier?" Michael nodded, but something in his voice wavered. "I'll have to check. Got a lot going on." Evelyn didn't push, but he saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes before she masked it with grace. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she asked innocently, "Are we going to see Evelyn again soon?" Michael paused, brushing her hair gently off her forehead. "Maybe." "She likes you," Lily said simply. Michael managed a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, that's kind of the problem." He kissed her goodnight, turned off the light, and sat alone on the couch afterward. Staring at the cold coffee Evelyn had left behind, he wanted to believe kindness didn't have strings. That connection didn't come with a price tag. But he'd spent so long surviving on scraps of certainty, he wasn't sure how to accept something that felt too good to be real. And in the silence, doubt curled itself around him like a second skin. Evelyn stood at the tall windows of her penthouse apartment, the city glowing below in glittering lines of gold and red. She held a glass of wine she hadn't touched, its surface undisturbed, her reflection in the glass just as still. Behind her, the sleek open floor plan of her home stretched out minimalist, expensive, quiet, too quiet. Her phone sat on the marble countertop, screen dark. No messages. No missed calls. She hadn't heard from Michael in 3 days. It wasn't the silence itself that unsettled her, it was how much it mattered. How quickly she'd come to expect his voice, his quiet wit, the way he looked at her like she wasn't Evelyn Hart, the executive, but Evelyn, the person. The woman beneath the armor. She had dated before, of course. But the men in her world were sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, more interested in her company's portfolio than her thoughts on family, on loss, on loneliness. Michael was different, grounded, real. He didn't care about headlines or net worth, he cared about whether his daughter had clean socks and if her bedtime stories were funny enough. And that's what terrified her. Because even now, standing in a penthouse above the city she helped shape, Evelyn felt like a stranger to herself. Michael's world was small but full toolboxes, school drop-offs, laughter over burnt grilled cheese. Hers was large but empty, every inch polished, every word curated. She had never wanted to be rescued, never needed anyone to fill the silence she'd chosen. But now, she found herself wondering if she could be more than a passing kindness in Michael's life. If she could belong in his world, or if trying would only unravel them both. She pressed her fingers to her temples, then let them fall. He was pulling away. She felt it. And part of her feared it was her fault, not because of what she lacked, but because of what she had too much of, too much wealth, too much distance. Too much of the life he never asked for. But still, she couldn't stop hoping, because somewhere in that quiet garage, Among grease-stained rags and little girl giggles, she'd found something she hadn't known she was missing, and she wasn't ready to let it go. The letter arrived in a pale pink envelope, folded carefully and addressed in a child's looping handwriting. To Miss Evelyn. Evelyn found it tucked inside her mailbox at the front of the boutique, where she still stopped occasionally to browse or exchange pleasantries with Christine. At first, she assumed it was a note from the shop, a receipt, or a thank you. But when she opened it, the handwriting, uneven and full of heart, told her otherwise. She sat down on a nearby bench beneath the boutique's display window and read the letter in the fading afternoon light. The street, quiet except for the rustle of wind and the distant bark of a dog. Dear Miss Evelyn, thank you for the dress. I know you didn't want us to know it was you, but I figured it out after Dad said someone special helped us. And you are. The dress made me feel like someone from a book. Like I could walk into a room and everyone would see me, not because I was rich or perfect, but because I was me. I felt brave. Dad says kindness is the best kind of magic. I think you have it. Sometimes I see you look at him when he's not noticing, and I think maybe you're a little bit lonely too. That's okay. We used to feel like that all the time, but now we don't as much. Because we found each other. You don't have to be a queen or a boss or anything like that all the time. You can just be Evelyn, or even a princess, if you ever wanted to be part of our story. I think you'd be a great one. Love. Lily. Evelyn read it twice, then folded it slowly and held it in her lap, the softest smile breaking through her carefully composed face. The ache she'd been carrying quiet, heavy, and unnamed shifted. Lily had seen her, not the polished woman in black dresses and boardrooms, her. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was standing on the outside of someone else's life. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd been invited into something real. The morning was cool and quiet, the kind of early spring day where the breeze carried both a chill and a promise. Michael was under the hood of a battered Ford, sleeves rolled up and grease smeared across his forearm, when a familiar voice cut through the clang of tools and soft country music playing from the corner radio. Do you have a minute? He looked up, squinting against the sun. Evelyn stood just outside the garage bay, hands tucked into the pockets of a light coat, her expression calm but unreadable. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over. Everything okay? I have something to tell you, she said. Something I hope you won't take the wrong way. That wasn't exactly reassuring, but Michael nodded for her to continue. I spoke with the director at the Maplewood School of Dance, she said. They're trying to expand, offer more classes, bring in new instructors, especially for kids who can't afford tuition. They've been struggling with funding, so I offered to help. Michael stiffened. Evelyn. She raised a hand gently. Wait, let me finish. He stopped. I made the donation under a name that means something to you. Something that means something to Lily. She took a breath. It's called the Hannah Turner Memorial Scholarship. For girls with big dreams and parents who work their fingers to the bone to help them. The air went still between them. Michael stared at her, chest tight. You did that? She nodded. Not for thanks, not for recognition, because your wife sounded like the kind of woman who believed in people, and because I see a lot of her strength in your daughter. He looked away for a second, the emotion creeping up on him faster than he could prepare for. That's a lot, he said quietly. I know, Evelyn said. And I didn't do it to make you feel like you owed me anything. I just thought maybe Hannah's name deserved to keep inspiring people. The way she inspired you, the way Lily inspires me. Michael swallowed hard, blinking quickly. She would have loved that. She really would have. For once, he didn't feel the need to pull away. He just stood there, grateful, overwhelmed. And something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. Maplewood was the kind of town where news didn't travel, it bloomed, rooted deep in morning coffees and casual chats across grocery aisles. One day, the community board at the local diner displayed a modest flyer about the new scholarship at the dance school. The next, Evelyn Hart's name, though not printed anywhere official, was on everyone's tongue. Did you hear she's funding the whole program? They say it's named after Michael's wife. That's something. Well, I just hope she's not buying her way into people's hearts. Michael heard it all, sometimes just in passing, sometimes directly. A friend from high school mentioned it during a break job. A teacher at Lily's school asked casually at pickup. Even old man Crenshaw, who never said anything more than morning, dropped a pointed, "Big city lady taking an interest in you now, huh?" At first, Michael tried to shrug it off. People talked. They always would. But by the end of the week, the weight of it started settling in. He felt it most in the pauses when conversation slowed as he entered the diner, when neighbors smiled a little too knowingly. It wasn't anger or malicite, was curiosity, and that somehow felt worse, like he was being examined, measured. He caught Lily playing in the front yard that Saturday, twirling in her dance slippers with the same joy that always lived in her bones. But even then, he found himself wondering what people thought when they saw them together now. Did they think he'd traded pride for money? That he was letting Evelyn swoop in and rewrite their lives? Later that evening, he stood on the porch, hands wrapped around a coffee mug gone cold, watching the street quiet down. He didn't regret Evelyn's gift, not for a second. The scholarship was good. It mattered. But still, the judgment spoken and unspoken pressed against his ribs. He was a mechanic, a single dad. He hadn't asked for attention or help. He'd simply fallen into something honest and rare. And now, it felt like the town was deciding if he deserved it. That was a weight even he wasn't sure how to carry. The next time someone brought up Evelyn, it was in the middle of a tire rotation. Danny from Two Bays, over a guy Michael had known since high school, tossed a wrench onto the tool bench and said it casually, like he was talking about the weather. "So, you and the city girl now? Must be nice. Fancy dinners, scholarships, people whispering your name like you hit the lottery?" Michael didn't look up right away. He finished tightening the lug nuts, methodical and calm, but something in his chest stirred a slow heat, not quite anger, not quite shame, just tired. He stood and wiped his hands on a rag. "You know what's nice?" he said finally. "Seeing your daughter walk into dance class with her chin high and a smile like she belongs there." Danny raised his brows. "Didn't mean anything by it. Just saying, folks talk." "I know they do," Michael said. "And maybe they'll keep talking. But Evelyn didn't do what she did for credit. She didn't do it to show off. She did it because she saw something worth believing in, even if nobody else did." He tossed the rag aside, the words sharper now. "She didn't make a speech. She didn't post about it online. She just gave quietly, without asking for anything in return. That's more than most people around here ever do." Danny held up his hands. "All right, man. Point taken." But the thing was, Michael hadn't been defending her for Danny. He'd been defending her for himself. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house had settled into stillness, Michael sat out on the porch with a blanket over his knees and Evelyn's name echoing in his thoughts. Not just as a woman who helped, but as someone he was beginning to see. Someone with flaws and fears, yes, but with a heart big enough to reach across the invisible line between their worlds. He'd spent so long convinced that real love had to follow certain rules. That people like Evelyn didn't end up with people like him. But maybe the rules were wrong. Or maybe they never mattered to begin with. Maybe the heart doesn't care how things look from the outside, only how they feel when someone chooses to stay. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Evelyn stepped into the shop, her heels clicking softly on the concrete floor, but this time with a nervousness she couldn't quite hide beneath her usual calm. Michael was beneath the hood of a red sedan, humming along to an old Johnny Cash song when he caught sight of her. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Didn't think I'd see you today." "I wasn't planning on it," she admitted, clutching something in her hand, a small black envelope. "But I need to ask you something." Michael arched an eyebrow, towel still in hand. "This sounds serious." "It is, kind of." She walked closer and held out the envelope. He took it, turning it over in his rough hands. "What's this?" "It's an invitation to my company's annual gala," she said. "It's next weekend. Black tie, Rooftop in the city. It's a whole thing. Michael looked down at the envelope, then back up at her, cautious. You want me to go with you? I do. She said it plainly, but her eyes held a flicker of vulnerability. It's not just about having someone on my arm. It's about you. About wanting people in my world to see the person who makes me feel human again. He didn't answer right away. The word gala alone made him stiffen. Black tie, formal wear, champagne-ethos weren't his things. His tux had long since become a memory from a wedding he barely remembered attending. And the idea of walking into a room full of CEOs and investors made his stomach twist. I don't exactly blend in with your crowd, Evelyn. I don't want you to blend in, she said softly. I want you to be there. As you. That's the point. He looked down again at the envelope, the gold lettering shimmering faintly under the garage lights. I'll have to find a suit, he said after a beat. Voice quiet. A smile broke slowly across her face, soft and honest. I think we can figure that out. He nodded, still unsure, still carrying the weight of difference between their worlds, but something inside him shifted. Maybe it wasn't about fitting in. Maybe it was just about showing up. And for her, he was ready to try. The suit came in a garment bag, delivered by Evelyn herself, though she insisted it wasn't a gift, just a borrowed favor from someone who owed her a tailored miracle. Michael had protested, of course, but not too loudly. Deep down, he knew there was no way the ancient suit buried in his closet was making a second debut. Not for a night like this. Now, as he stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, Michael adjusted the black tie for the third time, fingers fumbling with a knot that just wouldn't sit right. Are you sure this is how it goes? He called toward the hallway. Lily burst in with a grin, her sneakers squeaking on the wooden floor. You look awesome, Dad. She stopped in the doorway, eyes wide with approval. Like, seriously, you could be in a movie. Michael laughed, dropping his hands. That's a stretch. She marched up behind him and reached for the tie, her small fingers surprisingly confident. Miss Campbell showed us how to do this at school. For career day. Well, thank Miss Campbell for me, he murmured, letting her work. Once she was finished, he turned to face her fully. What do you think? Lily crossed her arms and studied him with mock seriousness. Sharp, mysterious, definitely not a mechanic. Michael smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. She smiled, but then her tone softened. You look happy, Dad. He paused. That quiet truth landed somewhere deep. I think I am. She stepped forward and straightened his collar like her mother used to, and he saw a glimpse of the girl she was growing in torso full of light and heart. You nervous? She asked. A little. She grinned. You're gonna be great. Just don't spill anything on your shirt. Michael chuckled. Noted. Outside, the sound of a sleek car engine purred into the driveway. Lily ran to the window. She's here! Michael grabbed his coat, giving the mirror one last glance. The man staring back at him was still the Samuro Hands, worn heart, but tonight he looked ready to step into a world he never thought he belonged to. And maybe, just maybe, he'd earned a place in it. The gala shimmered like something out of a dream. Michael had seen tall buildings before, but never like this lit from within. Glass walls stretching high into the sky, each floor humming with movement and money. The rooftop venue was even more surreal. Strings of white lights glowed above linen-draped tables, waiters in black vests moved like dancers, and the city stretched below them like a blanket of stars. Michael adjusted the cuffs of his borrowed jacket for the 5th time as the elevator doors opened. His boots had been traded for polished dress shoes, his usual oil-stained hands scrubbed clean. But still, he felt like a misplaced puzzle piece, something sturdy and real in a world too smooth, too shiny. Then Evelyn appeared. She was waiting just beyond the elevator, draped in deep navy satin that hugged her frame with effortless elegance. Her hair was swept back, a soft silver necklace catching the light at her collarbone. But it wasn't the dress or the glamour that made Michael stop it, was the way she smiled when she saw him, like everything around them, faded into quiet. You made it, she said, stepping closer. You sure? he asked, his voice low, a half-smile playing on his lips. Might have taken a wrong turn into a magazine cover. Evelyn laughed, the sound soft and steadying. You belong here. I'm not so sure about that. He meant it half-joking, but there was an edge of truth he couldn't shake. Men like him didn't walk red carpets. They stood behind velvet ropes, watching. She reached for his hand, just like that. No grand gesture, no dramatic moment. Just her hand sliding into his with quiet certainty, her fingers curling between his. Warm, steady, real. I am, she said simply. And if anyone asks, tell them you're with me. Her voice wasn't possessive, it was proud. And somehow, that was enough. Enough to soften the noise in his head. Enough to make the champagne sparkle less intimidating, the silk dresses less distant. Enough to remind him that showing up didn't mean pretending to be someone else. With her hand in his, Michael walked into the gala not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as someone who had been chosen to be there. And for the first time all night, he believed he deserved it. The music swelled around them, soft jazz, weaving through the warm hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter from some corner of the rooftop. Michael moved with Evelyn from one group to the next, her hand still loosely looped through his arm, her posture poised, her smile graceful. But he could feel it. The eyes. Polished men in bespoke suits. Women with diamonds at their throats and curiosity in their expressions. No one said anything outright, but the glances were lingering, the smiles tight, the conversations pausing just long enough when he entered the circle. Who is he? He doesn't belong. That's the mechanic, right? From that town, what's it called? Maple something? Michael caught a whispered comment near the bar. Something about a project, said with a too-smooth chuckle. And though Evelyn's grip on his arm never faltered, something inside him did. He leaned in. You're making headlines, he murmured. She arched a brow, sipping her champagne. Am I? They're staring like you brought a coyote in a tux. Evelyn's gaze drifted calmly over the room. She saw it, tooth, curiosity, the judgment. But when she looked back at him, it was as if the rest of the world had disappeared. Let them talk, she said, the corners of her mouth lifting in the smallest, most deliberate smile. They always do. He studied her for a moment. Not a flicker of shame or discomfort touched her. She wasn't embarrassed not of his worn hands or quiet way of standing slightly outside every conversation. She looked at him like she had nothing to prove and everything to protect. That smile just for him settled something deep inside. Besides, she added, squeezing his hand, if they're going to talk, they may as well talk about something worth remembering. Michael didn't answer. He just nodded, the tightness in his chest easing as they moved back into the crowd, not as a scandal, not as a curiosity, but as something real. And in that moment, he knew. The only story that mattered was the one they were writing together. The evening was beginning to wind down, the energy of the gala softening into something slower, gentler. Laughter grew quieter, conversations turned more intimate, and the crowd began to thin as people drifted toward the elevators or gathered in small clusters near the edge of the rooftop, glasses in hand, city lights stretching endlessly beyond them. Michael stood near one of the outdoor heaters, a glass of sparkling water untouched in his hand. He watched Evelyn from a few steps away as she spoke with an older couple in tailored coats, her laugh light, her poise as natural as breathing. And yet, when her eyes met his across the space, her smile changed, softer. Just for him. A moment later, she slipped away from the group and walked toward him, her heels barely making a sound on the tiled floor. You okay? She asked, reading the faraway look in his eyes. Better than okay, he said quietly. Just watching you move through this world, it's like watching someone float. She tilted her head. And you still think you don't belong in it? Michael smiled. Starting to think maybe I've just been in the wrong room all this time. Evelyn extended a hand. Then dance with me. Not in that room. Not under those lights. Just here. He hesitated, glancing at the mostly empty terrace, beside them lined with fairy lights strung between beams, casting a warm, golden glow. The music had shifted to something slow and old-fashioned, something that belonged more to record players and candlelit porches than high-rise rooftops. Michael set down his glass and took her hand. No spotlight, no announcements. Just the two of them, moving quietly beneath the fairy lights, the soft breeze tugging at the hem of Evelyn's dress and brushing through Michael's neatly combed hair. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of everything that hadn't been said: gratitude, longing, something that felt a lot like falling. He rested his hand on her waist, she leaned into his shoulder, and for a few perfect minutes, the world narrowed to one small dance floor beneath the stars. No judgment, no past. Just this, just them. Spring arrived in Maplewood with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the sound of birds returning to rooftops. The town began to bloom again, slowly shaking off winter's grip. And with it, something else had begun to change quietly, steadily, like the turn of a page. Michael stood in front of the old, abandoned Sinclair Motors building on the edge of town, the faded red sign still hanging above the rusted bay doors. It had been closed for nearly a decade, the property too much work for anyone to take on, too expensive, too forgotten, until now. He stared at the new sign mounted just beneath the old one, Turner's Community Garage, same name as his shop. But this time, the word community had been added not as decoration, but as a mission. Inside, the space was being cleaned and prepped by a few of the town's high schoolers' kids Michael had fixed cars for, or whose parents he'd helped when money was tight. They swept floors, moved boxes, and laughed as they worked, unaware that what they were helping build was about to change lives. He still wasn't sure how Evelyn had pulled it off. The funding had come through a foundation she knew people at, the property purchased under a shell company he'd never heard of. But when the paperwork was finally pushed across his desk, the name listed as owner and operator was his. Only his. No press release, no grand unveiling. Just a quiet gesture of belief. Michael had confronted her about it, of course. "This is too much," he'd said. "You didn't have to do this." Evelyn had only smiled, brushing his hand with hers. "I didn't have to, no. But I wanted to. You're not just fixing engines, Michael. You're holding this town together, one family at a time. You should have a space that reflects that." Now, standing in the sun outside the building that would soon house his new start, Michael felt something rare: peace. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building. With his own hands. On his own terms. And somewhere behind the scenes, Evelyn was still holding space for him to grow, quietly, steadily, without taking the credit. It was the beginning of something real, and this time, he didn't have to do it alone. The boutique looked just the same, but everything felt different. Sunlight streamed through the wide front windows, casting golden beams across racks of pastel dresses and glimmering shoes. Soft music played overhead, something classical and a little whimsical, and the familiar scent of lavender and polished wood still hung in the air. But the girl twirling in front of the mirror wasn't the same Lily who once stood there, clutching a dream in the form of a blue dress she thought she'd never wear. She was taller now, more confident. Her hair was longer, pulled back with a silver ribbon, and her feet moved with grace that came from a year of classes and endless hours of practice. Her spring recital was just 2 weeks away, and this time she'd been invited to perform a solo. And this time, she wasn't alone. Evelyn sat on the fitting room bench nearby, a soft smile on her lips, watching Lily with eyes full of quiet pride. She held Lily's coat in her lap and offered thoughtful suggestions when needed. But mostly, she just let the girl be. Michael stood a few steps behind them, leaning against the wall near the entrance, arms crossed over a flannel shirt, his smile small but full. He was content to let this be their moment. "I like this one," Lily said, giving the skirt a spin. It fluttered in soft lilac waves around her knees. "It feels like I'm floating." Evelyn nodded. "It's perfect." "You think so?" "I do," Evelyn said. And more importantly, you do. Lily turned back to the mirror, cheeks flushed with excitement. This one, she declared, definitely this one. As the boutique clerk went to wrap the dress, Lily walked over and nestled between Evelyn and Michael, slipping one hand into each of theirs. No hesitation, no distance, just family. I still remember the blue one, Lily said, her voice soft. That night changed everything. Michael exchanged a glance with Evelyn, something warm and unspoken passing between them. It was never just about the dress, Evelyn whispered, brushing a curl from Lily's face. Lily nodded. I know. And as they stepped back out into the spring sunlight, three hearts, one story it was clear, that what had once begun as a quiet act of kindness had become something far more lasting. Love, family, and the courage to believe in both.